Ladies and gentlemen, The Golden Record by NUS Stage, directed by Edith Podesta.
T-minus 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5. All three engines up and burning. 2, 1, 0, and liftoff.
Our modern technical civilization is 1/10,000 as old as mankind, a blink of an eyelash in the enterprise of cosmic time. Our epoch is neither the first nor the best. Events are occurring at a breathless pace and no one knows what tomorrow will bring. Whether our society will face the perils and be transformed, or whether in the next century or two we will destroy our technological society. But in either case, it will not be the end of the human species. Earth is only one small planet among 9 or so that endlessly circle our star, the Sun, and the Sun is but one of 250 billion stars that make up a great whirling pinwheel of gas and dust and stars called the Milky Way galaxy. In turn, the Milky Way is one of perhaps hundreds of billions of other galaxies. A light year is almost 6 trillion miles. Even quite optimistic estimates place the nearest civilization at a few hundred light years away. It would take our present spacecraft tens of thousands of years to reach the nearest star, and several tens of millions of years to travel to the nearest other civilization. It is a little like throwing a dart in the dark in Madison Square Garden, whose walls are affixed 20 balloons. There is some chance of puncturing a balloon, but the likelihood of success is stupefyingly small. But it is hard to resist sending out something of ourselves. Controlled by its own onboard computer, as well as transmitted instruction from the Earth, crammed with an array of scientific instruments. The 2 Voyager spacecraft should revolutionize our knowledge of the outer solar system. The spacecraft are accelerated by Jupiter's gravity to reach Saturn in much less time than would otherwise be possible. And Saturn's gravity is similarly utilized to reach Uranus, and so on. It is because of these gravity-assisted trajectories that the Voyager will eventually leave the solar system. The main objective of the Voyager mission is to gather a rich harvest of scientific information. It represents the first in-depth reconnaissance of the outer solar system, and I believe it will change our view of the planetary family of the Sun forever. But there is something else aboard the 2 Voyager spacecraft. Billions of years from now, long after its transmitters have died, when our Sun, then a distended red giant star, will have reduced Earth to a charred cinder, 2 phonograph records containing greetings from the planet Earth will be inexorably speeding on, wandering forever in the depths of interstellar space, preserving a murmur of an ancient civilization that once flourished on the distant planet Earth.
Just as with Pioneers 10 and 11, I want you to organize the effort to place an appropriate message aboard the 2 Voyager vehicles.
Perhaps some information on molecular biology, for example, on the structure of proteins or nucleic acids.
I organized a small group of scientific consultants to provide advice on the message contents. And because science fiction writers, artists, and musicians have been thinking about such problems much longer than most of the rest of us, I also queried my friends.
The Voyager should be equipped with a radar corner reflector so that it can be easily found by some future generation of fast terrestrial spacecraft that can overtake and heave this ancient derelict.
There is only an infinitesimal chance that a Voyager will ever be seen by a single extraterrestrial, but it will certainly be seen by billions of terrestrials. Its real function then is to appeal to and expand the human spirit, and to make contact with extraterrestrial intelligence a welcome expectation of mankind.
We should not represent human beings as individuals. We should stress the importance of community, include some representations of human beings in communities, cooperating together.
We should send a statement of hope that our civilization would continue long enough for the message to be read. Please leave me alone. Let me go on to the stars.
It could be painted with a coating of natural uranium, whose decay products would give a rough estimate of how much time had elapsed since it was launched.
Several consultants urged that we send information other than scientific.
I propose sending the famous Leonardo da Vinci drawing of a man with arms outstretched, and some comparable piece of Oriental art.
We should send music.
Yes, we can send a long-playing phonograph record. Because sound information on such a record is physically etched into the record grooves, it could last for a very long time, greater than the time for the spacecraft to venture to the stars. Pictures can also be encoded in the audio spectrum on such a record. So we could send in the same physical space aboard Voyager many more pictures than we could on the plug of Pioneer 10. The pressing of an ordinary vinyl 12-inch long-playing record is made from a mold, which in turn is made from a copper-positive master called a mother. Since the technology for such an engraving is at hand, it would seem ideal to send a mother to the stars. One side could contain the music, and on the other, pictorial information.
Thus, each Voyager spacecraft has a gold-coated copper phonograph record in a silvery aluminum cover affixed to the outside of its central instrument bay. Instructions on playing the record, written in scientific language, are etched on the cover. A cartridge and stylus, illustrated on the cover, are tucked into the spacecraft nearby. The record is ready to play. Each record contains 118 photographs of our planet, our civilization, and ourselves. 90 minutes of the world's greatest music, an audio essay, Sounds of the Earth, and greetings in almost 60 human languages, and one whale language, including salutations from the President of the United States, the Secretary General of the United Nations. This is an account by those chiefly responsible for the Voyager record, of why we did it, how we selected the repertoire, and precisely what the record contains.
When Carl Sagan first mentioned the Voyager record to me, I did not expect to end up constructing a pictorial message for extraterrestrials.
Consider yourself co-opted. A few pictures might be encoded on the record. 6 pictures. Submit your ideas and proposals.
We might show Earth, the DNA molecule, and a few shots of humans and animals.
Your job is to find photographs and construct diagrams if necessary. There is one catch.
We need an approved and fabricated record ready to bolt onto the spacecraft in about 6 weeks.
You have a month to find all the photographs.
Prepare them.
Secure legal permission for their use.
Draw all the diagrams.
Photograph everything to format.
Convert the pictures into a sound signal suitable for recording on a phonograph record.
And devise an instruction sheet for the cover of the record to tell anyone who finds it how to play it.
We are not prepared to sink a lot of money into this endeavor. Find some cheap system that already exists for converting pictures into sound.
It was soon apparent that we could fit over 100 pictures into a few minutes on the record. Of the 118 pictures in the finished package, 20 are in color.
Just exactly how realistic a picture of life on Earth do we wish to convey? Is the Voyager message to be a historical gesture or merely a social one?
There were a few topics that we intentionally avoided. We reached a consensus that we shouldn't present war, disease, crime, and poverty.
We should send only the best of ourselves.
The record would be incomplete without a demonstration of imperfections such as our violence. It would be naive to deny the importance of such phenomena in human culture and history. After all, more humans have killed one another or starved to death than have written string quartets.
If we showed ourselves as we really are, a species involved with struggle, wouldn't we at least be assured of the record's value as an accurate document?
We don't want any part of our message to seem threatening or hostile to recipients. Look how tough we are.
We should also avoid any sort of political statement in this message. A picture of Hiroshima or Mile, or of a noble and heroic warrior for that matter, seems more an ideological statement than an integral part of an image of Earth.
Similarly, no pictures that are specifically religious. If we include a picture of a cathedral, we would also have to include one of a mosque, a synagogue, and so forth.
Yes, being truthful is important in ways that might be momentarily obscured by culture. The most cherished beliefs of the previous decade have turned flimsy in this one. And even now, the prejudices of this particular moment lose their currency and turn into something else.
We are making something that will survive us and our time. Something that might be the only token of Earth the universe will have.
Artwork. A great deal of human art is shown in the music, which comprises a bulk of the record.
And extraterrestrials would have enough trouble understanding photographs of reality, or simple diagrams, without us including a photograph of a painting, which is in itself an interpretation of reality.
The criteria of the picture message should be informative, not aesthetic.
I find myself increasingly playing the role of an extraterrestrial. A mental exercise I had done in fun for many years. Only now, it was in earnest. I'll look at images and try to imagine that I had not seen these subjects before.
How might the photograph be misinterpreted?
What was ambiguous?
How could scale be deduced?
That bird flying in the distance, the wingtips partially obscured by the man's outflung arm. I know that the bird is a second creature in the distance, but if I didn't, couldn't it be a growth from the man's arm?
For as the late anthropologist and poet Lauren Isley wrote, one does not meet oneself until one catches a reflection from an eye other than human.
Those words echoed in my mind during this whole process. I was much influenced in trying to adopt this mode of thought by physicist Philip Morrison and science fiction author Robert Heinlein.
The concept of picture as we understand it on Earth is by no means universal.
Human beings from cultures that don't use pictures have to be educated to the concept before they see photographs as we do.
The picture should contain as much information as possible.
And they should be as easy as possible to understand.
We have on board some pictures with very little information, primarily to help recipients understand how to see pictures. The first two pictures in the sequence arc of objects should be found elsewhere on Voyager. For instance, the engravings on the record's cover. Now, as engravings, they can be perceived by senses other than vision. Beginning with these will give the recipients a way of comparing a photograph with an object they can touch.
The reconstruction of pictures from audio signals should be simple for any civilization able to find Voyager in the first place. But it is wise to begin with something easy. The diagram on the cover of the record, which shows how audio signal is to be reconverted back into video, ends with a picture of a circle.
Thus, if recipients follow the instructions correctly, the first picture they reproduce will be the circle shown on the cover. Now, this will tell them they are proceeding correctly. A circle also has the advantage of confirming the correct ratio of height to width in the picture raster.
It also seemed a good idea to use recurrent images, such as circle of people in pictures 36, 74, and 81.
This photo showing the position of the sun relative to some astronomical landmarks called pulsars appear on the cover of the record. The Andromeda galaxy in its position relative to our sun at the time of the launch. This image may help us date the age in which the Voyager was launched.
Well, the Andromeda is our nearest large neighbor in space. The close-up view of its core and dust lane should make it an obvious landmark.
It also provides a check to the handedness of all the pictures.
It will tell the recipients which is supposed to be the left-hand side and which the right hand. Since it must match the map on the cover and the real appearance of Andromeda in the sky, it also assures the recipients that they haven't processed all the pictures backwards.
From an interstellar point of view, the solar system is a little family huddled around a little star. If we wish to tell extraterrestrials that this is home, Jupiter and Mars are as much a part of home as New York or New Delhi.
We included a few pictures of other planets. Mercury, as seen by Mariner 10. Mars, as Viking saw it when it was approaching and preparing to land. Diameter and mass are shown. And Jupiter, with our first close-up look, furnished by Pioneer 11. Thus, we restate the implied message of the Voyager. We are spacefaring and wish to explore and contact the universe around us.
Now, spacefaring racers, of course, would not have seen these planets, but in other solar systems, they would have seen gas giants like Jupiter, cratered and airless wastes like Mercury, and perhaps even lovely blue water oxygen worlds like Earth.
The meadow in the middle of the sky.
Showing things that are at least somewhat familiar should help the recipients calibrate their system for reproducing pictures and introduce our concept of a picture, how we represent reality on a two-dimensional scale.
Certainly, it will help them to see something familiar before moving on to those pictures of things that they are completely unfamiliar with.
The transparent overlays of human anatomy would be ideal for showing structural, if not functional, human anatomy. These 8 pictures show superficial and deep human anatomy, including the skeletal structure, the nervous system, the circulatory system, and so forth. Picture 23 in particular was recorded in color to emphasize the difference between veins in blue and arteries in red. However, the pictures in the overlay is neuter. Where its sex organs should be is a gaping void.
Both to emphasize our sexuality, a non-trivial aspect of human anatomy, and to link the anatomy diagrams with the pictures to come, we added to picture 25 a rough sketch showing that in the area of the groin existed one of 2 sets of organs, and introduced male and female symbols to distinguish them. We use these symbols again in a sequence describing human reproduction.
There is much that is biologically informative, including the astonishing fact that there is a single-celled stage in the human life cycle, the stage of sperm and ovum. It did not seem likely to us that any depiction of human reproduction, no matter how graphic, would be perceived as pornographic by recipients, any more than we might find a scanning electron micrograph of the conjugation of 2 bacteria to be uncomfortably stimulating. Not only did this sequence have to be clear, it also had to be cleared by a NASA approval board.
It isn't difficult to understand the reluctance of a government agency who gets its funds from Congress every year to swim in the murky waters of human sexuality. Sexual information of a particularly explicit character might have unpleasant repercussions back here on Earth. Possible adverse public reaction. The depiction of a naked man and woman greeting the cosmos on the Pioneers 10 and 11 plaques has been criticized both on the grounds of being insufficiently explicit and sending smut to the stars.
They vetoed the picture we submitted of a man and a pregnant woman quite unerotically holding hands.
We refuse to include this. There's no way NASA is going to launch full frontal nudity to the stars.
We have decided to include this image, the silhouette of this image, that shows the position of the fetus, because we feel that without it, the continuity of the human reproduction sequence would be broken.
The fertilized egg at 2 stages. The left-hand picture, 1 second, shows the thickening of the membrane around the egg immediately after conception. The right-hand picture shows the time until the first cell division, about 43,200 seconds. This shows a fetus after about 60 days of development. The silhouette shows an embryo after about 40 days, and the silhouette of a fetus the same age as the fetus in the photograph. In the silhouette, the time from conception is given, as well as the size of the developing child.
We had hoped to include a photograph of a child actually emerging from its mother, But in all the photographs we looked at, the mother was so hidden by sheets, it wasn't clear that it was a woman, or even a person that was giving birth. We called Wayne Miller, who took this photograph, to get permission for its use.
But he was out of town, so we spoke to his son, who sounded as if he were in his 20s. We explained the nature of the project.
You want to send that picture into space forever? That birth picture? That's me being born! Of course you can use it. I guarantee my father's permission.
Interestingly enough, it turned out that the physician delivering the younger Miller was actually the boy's grandfather and the photographer's father.
Up till now, the picture sequence has consisted largely of scientific information, mostly diagrammatic, to introduce ourselves. From this point on, most of the pictures are photographs, and while the major criterion for selection was still the information conveyed, this information is often cultural, and many different kinds of information may appear in the same photograph.
For example, the birth picture is followed by a picture of a parent and a child. We wanted to convey some sense of the parent-child relationship. We also wanted to provide close-up views of the human face and hands. A Midwestern American family. 5 generations of the family are present, with a 6th generation in the portraits on the walls.
Silhouettes maximize the figure/background contrast and are a way for us to separate the various objects in a photograph by their outlines. It is a way of saying, this is what we want you to see in this picture. The silhouettes here gives the estimated weight and age of the members of the photograph, with the implication that the oldest member is approximately the age of the oldest human being. We wanted to show how long people live.
If the recipients can recognize this silhouetted human figure, they may guess that it was both difficult and seemingly impossible to scale this rock needle. The only point would be the accomplishment of doing it. If this message is communicated, it will tell extraterrestrials something very important about us.
What a strange image of us recipients might have.
But it should be clear that this is one person in movement, and it probably gives a better sense of how we move than anything else could have. The picture shows that we stand on 1 foot, on 2 feet, or, some of us, on our hands, and that we can turn over backwards.
We've superimposed the approximate time it would take to execute this part of the routine to indicate that we move in seconds as opposed to microseconds or years.
The musculature of the leg, which did not appear in the anatomy pictures, is shown, as are various positions in the act of running. Careful study may also reveal the presence of other people standing around, perhaps giving a clue that we are not just runners, but spectators in our sports events, and that there is competition.
This shows the important human activity of learning how to write.
We felt we needed to include a picture of mechanized agriculture, and these cotton pickers were chosen because the white cotton shows up the swath of the harvester clearly.
Originally selected as a close-up of hands and a face, this plainly shows a human being eating grapes. Functional anatomists may also note that 3 very different functions of the hands are also shown.
Now, here's another picture of a person eating grapes, but now with the location that adds more information. Namely, that we don't all get our grapes from fields. Some of us get them in markets. A recipient economy with money, buying and selling may even deduce that those are in fact prices in the background.
We wanted to make sure that the eating and drinking functions of the mouth were clear. The mouth performs a variety of functions. It also tells the galaxy that we live by bread and water
and ice cream. Now here is a group of people looking at the bones of ancient animals in a museum. Behind them is a mural that shows the animals as they were when they were alive. The anatomy overlays and the following picture may help recipients recognize the bones in this one.
We wanted to show a scientific instrument being operated by a human being. If the information and evidence from the previous photographs suggests that our eyes be our organs of vision, and if the function of the spectacles in picture 68 is to be guessed, then the purpose of the microscope might also be inferred. And When I spoke to the photographer, he made some obscure remarks about the substance the old man was smoking.
The photomicrograph of dividing cells will prove that we have discovered microscopy. Even though the microscope in the picture 100 couldn't have been the same one that took this, recipients will know that we have microscopes, so they may figure out that this is an example of one.
Books have been the means by which humans have stored and remembered information not coded into our genes or brains. Without books and writing, human civilization could not have developed.
Perhaps the most appropriate page to send would be Sir Isaac Newton's System of the World, on which for the first time in human history, the procedure for launching an object into orbit was explained and diagrammed. The edition we photographed was printed in 1728.
This 12-minute oral essay was conceived for two audiences, the human and the extraterrestrial. We wanted to use the microphone as a means of enhancing Voyager's portrait of our planet and ourselves, to give a sense of the variety of auditory experiences that are part of life on Earth.
The world of our imagined extraterrestrials would be very unlike our own.
The very idea of distinguishing between musical and non-musical sounds poses a problem. In this universe, such distinctions would be more blurred than it is here.
If the denizens of a distant planet could make sense of the essay,
And arguably, it may be the easiest part of the record for an alien intelligence to relate to.
then perhaps they will not be wholly unacquainted with the paradoxes time engenders, and will listen in a tolerant spirit.
Think of every sound you've ever heard.
I understand you have the finest recordings of croaking frogs, the meanest hyenas, the most devastating earthquakes. How would I go about obtaining a copy?
For what purpose?
We're trying to put a record together to send to interstellar space. We're trying to put together a suite of sounds that we hear on Earth. We can't afford to give you more than the cost of a reel of tape and return postage.
The sounds will be organized chronologically within an oral essay. There are many liberties taken within that very broad structure, but the fundamental direction of the montage is evolutionary, from the geological through the biological into the technological.
Proper respect. Oh, at last, wonderful. You can have anything I have. I'll bring it to you myself. The most beautiful whale greeting was one we heard off the coast of Bermuda in 1970. That's the one that should last forever. I'll send that one.
Why, sure. You're welcome to all our sounds. Take as many as you want.
And I've got the best rocket launch you've ever heard. The Saturn V liftoff recorded from the mission control room with a countdown, ignition roar, cheers, applause, and even the heartfelt wish of fly bird blurted out by a man momentarily overwhelmed by what people can do. And I've also got a great hurtling freight train.
The essay begins with a giddy whirl of tones, reflecting the motions of the sun's planets in their orbits. A musical readout of Johannes Kepler's Harmonica Mundi, a 16th century mathematical tract, whose echoes may still be heard in the formulas that make Voyager possible.
Each frequency represents a planet. The highest pitch represents the motion of Mercury around the Sun, as seen from Earth. The lowest frequency represents Jupiter's orbital motion. Inner planets circle the Sun more swiftly than outer planets. The particular segment that appears on the record corresponds to, very roughly, a century of planetary motion.
Kepler was enamored with the literal music of the spheres, and I think he would have loved their haunting representation here. upheavals of our planet's early history.
Most of the Earth's atmosphere is thought to have been outgassed through volcanoes, fumaroles, and cracks on the surface of our planet in the first few 100 million years of geological time.
Gurgling sounds similar to chocolate pudding on a stove, suggestive, we hoped, of simmering life.
Chemical reactions induced by solar ultraviolet light and electrical storms initiated a sequence of chemical reactions that led eventually to the origin of life.
A momentary evocation of the hundreds of millions of years when these were the only sounds of Earth, with special emphasis on the oceans as the scene of our origins.
The oceans themselves were outgassed in the Earth's interior.
The sounds in this essay accurately reflected the timescale of Earth's 4.5 billion year story, all but the last few moments would have been only the gurgle of waves and the whisper of wind across barren plains.
Mammals would have to roar out all they had to roar in a few seconds.
The proud accomplishments of all human civilization would have ended with a single beep of Morse code. Most of these sounds were taken from the CBS library,
With the exception of one adult male cricket, Telegrilius onchineticus, who is performing a serenade to the females.
A chorus of creatures to suggest developing fauna as Earth gets really busy with life.
Birds. Elephants.
The voice of a lone primate rises above the others and seems to screech its mad announcement of a new consciousness. A lonely bay that reverberates with the dangers and uncertainties of our beginnings. A human being makes its first appearance, walking erect with its hands free to change the world.
Humans begin to use fire to alter the environment, and the hearth becomes perhaps the site of the birth of language and culture. Our upright position left our hands free to manipulate the environment. A critical moment in human history occurred when the first stone tools were made out of soft rock, more than 2 million years ago. Enormous numbers of stone cutting, flaking, penetrating, and pounding tools are found in many Paleolithic sites.
The dog is heard to bark again, but this time, all traces of menace are gone. Animals have been domesticated. A suite of agricultural and construction sounds. We tested a few roosters and cows.
But they all sounded terribly stagey.
Ad astra per aspera.
To the stars, through difficulty.
Many human miles are covered in this transportation sequence. The horse and cart start out on a dirt road and end up on a paved one. The transition modes from there on come very quickly and reflect accurately the astonishing pace of progress in the development of transportation over the last 100 years. Since horse carts, chopping wood, the hiss of bus brakes, and other sounds of our era take up as much time on the record as the rippling of primeval ponds, the sequence is open to the criticism that it, like our written history, vastly overemphasizes the last few thousand years at the expense of the millions that preceded them in the chronicle of our species.
10, 9, 8, ignition sequence start. Engines on. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. All engines running. Launch connect. Liftoff. We have liftoff. The time
The wonderful sound of a kiss proved to be the most difficult to record.
Keep it heterosexual.
Within such a constraint, we tried every permutation we could think of without success. Jimmy Iovine happened to show up that day and was most anxious to produce a believable kiss by sucking on his arm.
This is impossible. A kiss that lasts forever, that has to be real. Too faint. Too smacky.
It felt and sounded fine.
The very first cries of an infant and the stilling of a 6-month-old's cries by his mother.
We know that EEG patterns register some changes in thought. Would it be possible for our highly advanced technology several million years from now to decipher my thoughts?
A recorded session for your innermost self. Using a medical data recorder attached to an audio tape recorder, the inner workings of your brain, heart, eyes, and muscles recorded.
Despite the fact that there was only a tiny chance that my mind would ever be read this way, the course of my thoughts seemed to me to be worthy of serious consideration. I made a sort of mental itinerary of the ideas, culture, philosophy, and individuals of history whose memory I hope to perpetuate. And with the exception of a couple of irrepressible facts of my own life, I managed to stick to it pretty well.
The hour was electronically compressed into a minute, and it is a fierce sound, something like a string of exploding firecrackers.
The concluding moment of this essay sounds ironically like the rasp of a phonograph needle left to languish unattended at the end of a record.
It is in fact a recording of a quickly varying natural radio source, some 600 light years away from us, and designated CPI 133. When the first pulsar was first discovered, the regularity of its beat was thought to be a sign of intelligent life.
Although we now know pulsars are rapidly rotating neutron stars.
Sounds a little like recorded radio static from the depths of space.
The electrical signatures of a star and a human being seem, in such recordings, not so different, and symbolize our relatedness and indebtedness to the cosmos. 1900 years ago, Horace wrote that words challenge eternity. The fact that we recall his epigram proves him right. We have no way of knowing how much of this beautiful planet will be obliterated long before Voyager ceases its wandering. How many of the voices celebrated on the record will be silenced forever by our carelessness, or merely by time? Voyager moves among the stars, bearing its cargo of echoes and images, and in the logic of such distances, it keeps us alive. My feelings as a 27-year-old woman, they're on that record. It's forever. It will be true 100 million years from now. For me, the Voyager is a kind of joy so powerful, it robs you of your fear of death.
Hello from the children of planet Earth.